I call the Honourable Member Dr David Clark.
Mr Speaker, I came into this Parliament motivated by a concern about the growing gap between rich and poor. This bill confirms the 2010 tax changes made by the National Government. It confirms measures that have grown the gap between rich and poor in New Zealand. The 2010 tax package saw the top 10% of earners get over 40% of the value of the tax cuts. The bottom 20% got less than 2% of the value of those tax cuts, and any benefit they got was swallowed up in a GST increase of 15% that went through at the very same time. This is the sobering reality, Mr Speaker. We have a government opposite that is content to protect the interests of the wealthiest few New Zealanders, the top 1% of earners, while the rest of New Zealand is going backwards. And today, in this bill, we are being asked to support these changes that will drive the gap between the very wealthiest and the rest of New Zealand. And here we are in this Parliament passing those changes through again. This is the most uncomfortable bit about this bill. The bill will proceed anyway. The bill has the support of the National Government and its allies, those who have kowtowed the whole way through, content to see that gap between the very wealthiest and the rest of New Zealand grow and grow and grow. We have to pass tax bills because they make sure that the laws line up, that the taxes can be collected, and that New Zealand can continue to support schools and hospitals. But we must note that that support is dwindling. In real terms, support to health and education is dropping. If we look in the health sector, we see year upon year upon year the real value of support to that sector dropping. And we know it. All of us in our heart of hearts know it. We see people come into our constituency offices with children that they can't feed properly. This is an outrage. This is an absolute outrage. And members opposite might find that amusing. They might find that a reason to make jokes, cheap shots. The people that are starving are not people that can defend themselves easily. But we on this side of the House, we have a view that New Zealand should have a much more positive future. We would like to see a New Zealand where everyone can get ahead. A tax system that is fair, that rewards everyone for the effort that they put into our society. A New Zealand that makes sure that everyone pays their fair share and that everyone gets the benefits of that to get ahead. That is the New Zealand we would like to see on this side of the House. It will be a more positive New Zealand. It will be a New Zealand for everyone, not just for the very wealthiest few. These people on the opposite side of the House, they don't even interest themselves in tax avoidance. We don't see any real measures here that are going to crack into that. We know that the government doesn't even have a measure for tax avoidance. It could be $1 billion a year, quite likely. That would mean that in 5 years' time, if they caught all the tax avoidance that was going on, they wouldn't have needed to do their asset sales program. But it's just not an issue for them. They're content to preserve the interests of that wealthiest few. That's why they don't want a capital gains tax. Labor will introduce research and development tax credits, so those innovative firms that are making change, that are innovating, and that are creating export businesses can get ahead. Because we know that's real money coming into the economy that can support those public services that we all want. Nobody wants to see their neighbours' kids not able to afford shoes to go to school. Nobody wants to see that. People care, and Labor will support that kind of innovation that leads to that wealthier society. We want pro-growth tax reform. We want a capital gains tax that pushes money out of the speculative housing sector and toward the productive economy. We want to introduce monetary policy that actually puts more money into Kiwis' pockets, not into the banking sector. We want to introduce universal KiwiSaver that facilitates that. We want to introduce a power policy that sees businesses paying more than $500 a year less on their power bills. We want to make sure that a housing sector is properly looked after, that we actually have the houses necessary to house New Zealanders so they're not living in garages or overcrowded housing conditions. We want a government that puts people first, and this government is refusing to do that by putting these same taxes through year after year after year that confirm that growing gap between rich and poor, and they don't care. And they don't care. They're gesturing opposite. They don't care. For them, it is not an issue, as long as the wealthiest few continue to get ahead. In this legislation, there are a couple of other anomalies that I want to address, Mr. Chair. We have community housing entities who are in this legislation given a new framework. We here have the Minister deciding who has charitable status and who does not. The Minister will have a wide-ranging discretionary power to approve or disapprove of charitable exemptions. The delegation to the Minister of the effective right to confer lower taxes on some and not others is bad law, plain and simple. Some taxpayers get a tax cut, some don't, and it's up to the Minister to decide. That is bad law. Geographic location will be taken into account, household composition and income. There are a bunch of criteria, but it was too hard. And part of the reason it was too hard was because this government pushed this bill through, the submission period of the bill through over the summer. Whilst New Zealanders were enjoying their well-deserved break at the end of the year, this is when the bill was put through its consultation period. They didn't want to hear the feedback. They didn't want to hear why their bill wasn't adequate. The accountants told them. The tax firms told them. They said, we'll be back here sorting this law out later. And we will. We know that parts of this law will have to be amended. And it's because of the process this government has run. It is because all they were concerned about was pushing through these changes to give the Minister extra powers. And it's not good enough. We don't want this kind of New Zealand on this side of the house. We want a New Zealand that does give everyone the chance to get ahead, to get a job, tax policies that actually encourage employment growth. We want the monetary policy that gives the Independent Reserve Bank the right to have other targets, not just interest rate targeting, but actually have employment targets. That actually has on their board representation from a variety of sectors, that actually make sure that economic growth is in their sights, not just interest rates. Plenty of other countries do it. Why not New Zealand? We want tax policy that makes it easier for people to put money into productive investments rather than speculation in the housing sector. And we want all of these other things looked at. We want to be a bit more hands-on, not just take our hands off, say the growing gap between rich and poor is inevitable. It's something that will just happen, and let's just pass another set of these tax settings. Let's just wash them through for another year. Let's just watch that gap between the very richest few, and the rest of us grow bigger and bigger. Let's watch the capital accumulate for that top 1%. That's what this government is doing. We used to be in the top third of the OECD in terms of inequality. Now we're in the bottom 40%, and it's very hard to get back from there. But a capital gains tax will start to set us on that track. Not only will it help us grow the economy, which of course we want to afford those public services, but it will actually help to reduce inequality. It'll help to cut down on that tax avoidance, which we know is crippling New Zealand. Last year, the Inland Revenue found that 107 out of 161 high wealth individuals who control more than $50 million worth of assets in New Zealand declared their personal income in the last financial year was less than $70,000.
Unbelievable.
Unbelievable. The starting point for the top tax bracket. So these people were saying that they had net worth over $50 million, but they didn't have earnings that put them in the top tax bracket. Completely implausible. But for this government, it's no concern. It's no concern at all. They pass the rates on to another year, they go on. Mr. Chair, a Labor government will bring about positive change. We will have tax policy that grows the economy, that puts people first, that grows employment, that actually makes a difference for Kiwi families, that makes housing affordable, and that will be positive for New Zealand.
Good speech.
I call the Honourable Kate Wilkinson.
And final reading of the Taxation, Annual Rates, Employee Allowances and Remedial Matters.